You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. Welcome to On Mission. I am Matt Davis, and today my guest is Dr. David Parker. Dr. Parker lives in Pumpkin Town, South Carolina, with his wife, Linda, and they have two adult daughters, Rebecca and Sarah. David's first job was working on a dairy farm in Michigan, earning $1.50 per wagon load of hay stacked in the barn. That sounds like hard, dirty work, and I can't wait to hear about that experience as a young man. His favorite meal, very wisely chosen, is his wife's meatloaf. And his hobbies include things like woodworking, construction, music, composition, of course, but surprisingly perhaps, computer scripting and programming, boating, fishing, hiking, and biking. The guy stays busy. David is a University of Michigan graduate and no question loves to say go blue all the time. In fact, I saw it on his water bottle earlier this morning. He loves football, especially Detroit Lions football, which I was cheering for y'all in the playoffs this year and really thought maybe this was the year, but I'm sorry about that, how that turned out this year. Maybe next year. That's what we say as Cubs fans. David loves the Lord Jesus, and it comes through in everything that he does. He is a devoted husband, a retired educator from teaching at the university level for 41 years. He currently serves as a church music pastor. He is an active vocal soloist and ensemble performer, a music business entrepreneur, and started a website that helps lots of folks publish great Christian music and many other avenues. Can't wait to have this conversation. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
So your wife's meatloaf is your favorite meal, and I obviously that's a good choice, right? I haven't had it personally, but it must really be something if that's like number one on the list.
It's amazing. When she says, "Do you want meatloaf tonight?" Boy, my eyes just pick up.
That's the number one thing. Well, some people are easy to please, you know.
Yes,
that's the thing.
yes.
Simple pleasures of life. Meatloaf is like a comfort food, you know.
Yes.
And I'm not sure God intended meat to be put into that, shape and form, but mankind has perfected it. So,
Well, and I always know there are going to be leftovers in the refrigerator.
Okay.
So
well, there you go. It's pretty much the same leftover.
Yes.
All right, so your first job is working on the farm in Michigan, bucking bales or filling hay loads, wagon loads, for not a lot of money. So how in the world did you get roped into that as a young man?
Well, my dad was a city official in Pontiac, Michigan, but we lived, ironically, we lived 27 miles from his work. And when I moved to Pumpkin Town, I was 27 miles. I was 27 miles from where I was teaching. And
Perfect.
We had a lot of mysterious, parallels in our lives. But we lived in an old home that was built in 1869 by a Civil War prisoner that went back north and built the core part of the home, and then it had been added around. Had a dirt floor basement, and we had 40 acres, and I had a horse when I was 8 years old. 4 miles of dirt roads to the nearest paved road.
Oh, wow.
The closest neighbor was a long-distance phone call because the line, it makes me sound like
People
somebody
today-
said, "You're 95 years old."
Yeah, they don't even know what a long-distance call is, let alone
No.
never went on a dirt road.
Well, and we had, even then, the phone was party, so you'd pick it up to call, and somebody's already talking, so you put it back down. But no, I just wanted to, I think the motivation was, I was a trumpet player, had done a lot with trumpet, in fact, was a brass major of Bob Jones before I changed to a voice. But I wanted a new trumpet. I had this really old cornet, and so I think it took a couple summers of that. The farmer would show up, and he was trustworthy and trusting me, and he would just show up like after dinner, drive up our driveway and say, "Okay, how many loads do you have?" And right then and there, he would pay me, and we just saved it all until I had enough to buy my trumpet that I eventually used a lot in college. I traveled with a musical team 2 summers, just brass. That was what I traveled
with. That sounds awesome, yeah.
And but it sits in my music room right now. And people ask me, "Would you play that?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I have a great tone for about 30 seconds, and then it's gone."
Yeah, it does take some practice.
But it was a great job. We'd unload the wagon, and then I'd jump on the tractor and drive it out to the field. And he had a kick baler, so it was kicking bales up. They weren't stacked in the wagon, and I'd unhook it and hook up the next wagon, drive it back, and it was a conveyor. And we would unload and. You know, you looked at the end of the day. You looked like a drug addict because you had all these hay picks in your arms, and
it's nasty.
And it really dehydrated you. But it was a great job for a young man.
Do you think it's valuable for young people to have those kinds of jobs and have to kind of work with their hands and figure things out?
Absolutely. And I worked hard. I knew, that I was earning something. I had a goal, and I think it was excellent for me. And my dad fully supported it. My mom and my brother had done it before me, and so it was the thing to do. There weren't many other jobs. There were no McDonald's nearby, And
well, it's also the kind of job that makes you want to move up in the world,
Yes, that's true. That's true, and not without its misfalls where I buried a hay hook in my knee one time and had stitches, and
that was your old knee.
That was
You don't have that knee anymore.
I don't have that knee anymore.
Got rid of that knee. I have heard from our own Coach Pill that you have. I thought he was the only one in the world that could have 3 hip replacements, but I've heard that you've had 6 joints replaced. Is that right?
Yes, and three hips. I met Jeff Pill when he was still coaching for U.S. Soccer in Dr. Chuck Phelps' church out in Concord, New Hampshire, and he had contracted something that he was in the hospital, and Dr. Phelps and Dr. Phelps said, "Let's go to the hospital." And so I did, and I sang to him in the hospital, and that's when I first met him.
Wow.
But not long after that, he had his first hip replacement, and I had my first hip replacement. But his hip was replaced by the same person that did Jack Nicklaus's hip.
Naturally.
And I had, just... I don't know if it was his first hip replacement there.
I'm sure he was very professional.
But that was 2001. 2011, I had another hip replacement, and 2018, I had one shoulder done, and 2019, the other shoulder just totally replaced. And then in 1 year, 2022, early in the year, I had one knee done. 6 months later, the other knee done. Oof. And then not quite 6 months later, because there aren't that many months in the year, I had the hip redone, just as he had his hip redone. Yep. I had chromium and cobalt poisoning, and so they redid it. But who knows what? Nobody in my family has had joint replacements, but I was very much into running when in my 30s. I have a 3:26 marathon.
Oh, wow.
I was running up to 50 miles a week, and of course, when I was young, I played hockey. I love hockey. And I played football in high school, and I've just always
So you're kind of looking back and seeing that took a toll.
Probably did it.
Well, do you have to like budget extra time to get through the airport security then? I mean, do they have questions for you?
I always flag them. It's like Christmas when I go through.
The thing lights up.
Yeah, that's it.
What is this guy made of?
That's right. I say I'm worth more in a recycling bin if I die. Or if I have an accident, they'll call a mechanic. They won't call a doctor, So,
well, I wondered what that sound was when you walked by. No. But you are the $6 million man for sure.
That's right.
And most people these days, that's one movie they never remade. I don't know why, but just didn't stand it. I guess maybe it's ripe. We could do it. But you have had a very interesting life. You focused your life on ministry and serving the Lord. You've gone on. You mentioned being at BJ as a college student, and then you have a degree from the University of Michigan. Is that an advanced degree, or what?
Yeah, that's my doctorate.
Your doctorate, okay.
And that was a miracle of itself. After my master's at Bob Jones, moved to Cincinnati, and I studied with the teacher of one of the greatest baritones of the 20th century. His name was Sherrill Milnes, and I wanted to study with his teacher. And I actually got to study with Sherrill Milnes at the University of Michigan some. But I studied with him for 3 years with the intent of going. My wife's from Cincinnati too, so that was very convenient with Cincinnati. And I really wanted to go to Cincinnati Conservatory, and he helped me work up an audition. I did an audition, and they totally rejected me because I was from an unaccredited institution. And that just devastated me. So the next year, and God really worked in my life and humbled me through that. But I kept working because I felt this is what God wants me to do. He wants me to pursue excellence in voice and then be able to train a generation of Christian musicians. And so the next year I auditioned at Cincinnati and at Michigan, and Cincinnati rejected me again. The University of Michigan said very clearly on their application that we will accept no one from an unaccredited institution. They gave me an audition, and I got a complete full ride. I never paid $1 to the University of Michigan for 3.5 years. In fact, they paid me for some operas that I sang in and things, and it was a fabulous, wonderful experience. Unsaved professors that, again, the Lord used them to help train me and mold me, and opportunities started to open up there. I sang my first Messiah with the Flint Symphony, and went down to Toledo and did a Messiah down there with the Toledo Symphony, and sang St. Matthew Passion up in with the Interlochen Orchestra, and just a lot of things really began to open up. And Dr. Gustafson, who was the dean of Bob Jones, called me at the end of my second year, said, "David, we have an opening, and we want you to come back." And I couldn't believe hearing myself, but I said, "Dr. Gus, I can't," because Michigan didn't have any summer program. I said, "If I come back now, I will never finish my degree." I remember telling him, if I learned one thing at Bob Jones, it was finish the job.
Yeah, right. It's in stained glass.
And, yes. And he said, "Well, we can't promise that we have position next year." And I said, "Well, I just have to leave that to the Lord." And the next year, almost to the day, he called me again. And so my wife and I went down and we prayed, and we said, we're going to approach this just like, I don't want to run into this just because it's what I want to do. We want to make sure God's working in this. And they required my wife to work. And she had already been in the area of early childhood education. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want her to be on her knees in the office building filing things in file cabinets or something. Or I wanted her, and they say we hire you as a team. So we prayed and said, and we told them that if we're a team, she needs to feel that she is fulfilling her area of talent, expertise. And it opened up a elementary school, early childhood actually, a position for her that she taught when it was all said and done, 16 years in that. Went on to get her master's in early child education, started teaching in the university, worked on her doctorate. She now has her doctorate in early child education and teaches on the university level, and her students love her. And that's why I mentioned to you in your contact that we have a boat. The name of our boat is Pear Docks. So
she too has gone that route with the academics. But you talk about the preparation. You've talked a little bit, hinted a little bit about how God opened doors. This is the OnMission podcast, and we only talk to people like yourself who are about something bigger than themselves, and trying to accomplish something of eternal value and significance. And so it's important to kind of take a step back from that, the hows and what happened, to why, right? And so the question that we always ask people right up front is, well, what is your mission in life? And maybe you've seen that sort of grow and adjust over the years and decades of life and ministry. But as you sit here today, how do you articulate your mission in life?
I'll just give a quick anecdote of where I can clearly see it began. I was a student at Bob Jones University, and I was in music, and it was my sophomore year, and all of a sudden I needed pretty serious surgery, and it was going to be done. I was able to stay in school, but it was going to be done that Christmas. And I remember getting down on my knees. You remember the practice shacks, we called them, out there by the athletic field? You probably never frequented them.
I saw them, but I never went in there. Yeah, had nothing to practice.
Yeah. And getting down on my knees there and just pouring my heart to the Lord, and that was a turning point of real focus that I'm going to follow God no matter what. And God just seemed to bless from then on out in my academia. And
do you recommend? Let me pause you there for a second and ask a clarifying question. Do you recommend that young people do that as a step of dedication and a conscious choice, or do you, in other words, demystified from any external experience that I'm having?
Yes, right, right.
It seems like obviously you sense the presence of the Lord and His leading, but it seems like what you were saying there didn't really come with an answer as to what that would be.
No.
It was more of a whatever.
Right. And I've always stressed with students, as I've had an opportunity to, that God will bring moments in your life and experiences in your life that you may not even know where it's going to lead, but you stay yielded to Him and seek what His best for your life, and it will unfold. And like the University of Michigan, when I was turned down, and the Lord just opened all the doors, and it was like the gates opened. And I remember, and this goes back, but I was walking down the hall, and all my colleagues that were doctoral students at Michigan were standing in a line in the hall, and I said, "What are you doing out here?" It was the business office. They said, "Oh, we're paying the part of our school bill that we don't, that school doesn't cover." And this one guy asked me, he says, you have a bill, don't you? And I didn't know what to
kind of
admit there.
Yeah.
They're all going to hate me.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have a bill. But and God just provided all of that. And I could say anecdote. But mission-wise, the Lord brought many people. And you know that God will use people to craft you and use you. I was a mathematics minor at Bob Jones University. I've loved math, and that opened the door when I was studying. That I worked in a bank, and in fact, before I left for graduate school, one of the major things that I feel Satan brought up as a distraction from my mission was I was offered to be a branch manager of a bank in Cincinnati, and I would have loved that. Just sailed out my years as a bank manager and sung on the side because I was already singing in Cincinnati and sang with
I'm just trying to imagine Dr. David Parker, bank manager.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't work.
And I was there in Cincinnati the same time a black, very tall baseball player named David Parker was on the Cincinnati roster. And I can't tell you how many times my nameplate was stolen in the bank that they wanted Dave Parker's nameplate. And I got a letter from a kid in Arkansas that wanted a signed baseball. And I guess maybe I could have done that. But anyway, back on mission, God just, as and I'm not saying I'm the most God-focused person, but I always was in a church. I felt the church was so important in ministry. And I was a music pastor in Cincinnati, then I was a music pastor in Michigan, and then have been in a few different churches in South Carolina since we've been back. But God just continually showing little steps along the way, and this area of vocal excellence is something that I wanted to do in teaching it, and I had some specialties that Dr. Gus wanted me particularly to use at Bob Jones. I was the only diction teacher there, teaching the Italian, the Latin, German, French, and my doctoral languages were Russian and French. And so I've been teaching linguistics for 40 years at Bob Jones. And to be able to do that and see that being used in students' lives if they've gone on, of course, not every student is a success, unfortunately, but many great successes for the Lord in church ministry, in professional performance. I have a student that's singing with opera companies all over the place, but he's a solid, fundamental, born-again believer, and we have great fellowship.
Well, I definitely want to explore with you that concept of success. All right,
okay.
What does that look like, and what is it not? You gave a wonderful message in our General Assembly earlier today, and you were talking about worship and how it's distinct, it's different, it's supposed to be and reflect the character and nature of God. But you mentioned that your life verse, if I got it right, is 1 Samuel 12:24. Did I get that correct? And so I wonder if you could kind of explain that life verse. It says, "Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider how great things he hath done for you." Why, out of all the choices in the Bible, is that your life verse, and how does that unfold for you?
Well, I've always been impressed in the concept of gratitude. I was taught that in college. If gratitude dies on the altar of a man's heart, he's nigh well hopeless, and well nigh hopeless. And I remember as a student being very grateful, knowing the sacrifice my parents were doing just so that I could be in undergraduate school and paying. I never had to work until near the end that I wanted to get engaged, and I had to get 3 jobs to buy a ring, but I was never paying for my school bill. But I'm not sure when I chose that verse, but I was so impressed. But that's why I want to serve God, is the gratitude that he, of all people, allowed to know his redeeming grace when I could have been brought up so differently and, maybe not had the opportunities that I've had, and that God gave me all such tremendous opportunities that I have deep gratitude, and then a very clear understanding of awe that it was instilled in me. The message I gave today was instilled from many godly professors that I had.
Yeah.
To have a fear and awe of this God we serve. And
so how does music play into that because your whole message today, which was very practical in its application, began in a very magnificent way, in a sense of the awe of God, the reverence of God, and the fear of God. You talked quite a bit about the fear of God, and you even defined that, I think, very well biblically and how that breaks down. But how does music play into that concept of the reverence and awe of God and reflecting that in the human condition?
Well, in sacred, you talk about on the sacred side, or you're going to see a lot of secular tomorrow, but on the sacred side, it's part of worship, so it needs to reflect, as any worship, the awe of God, the holiness of God, in the fear of God. As far as on the outside, the verse has been taken way too far, I think, but God has given us all things to enjoy. God has given us the beauty of nature and the beauty of music. And, music is everywhere, whether it's a bird singing or the wind going through the trees, But I always taught my students, you need to realize or to search out where your gifts are that God has given you. And I would preach that. I had a message on talents just about that I would preach in churches as I traveled, exhorting parents to look to try to identify in their children what strengths there are. Like our daughter Rebecca, that's going to be here tomorrow night. She would come home from junior high and she would want to tell us everything she'd learned in school that day. And I would say, Rebecca, you may be a teacher someday. You'd love to impart what you've learned. And that's just a gift you had. And she started as a mathematics major because she wanted to go into optometry because she had issues with her eyes, and that just really, and she went 2 years of that, and she came to me and she said, Daddy, I love math. I'm good at math. She was getting all A's and everything. She says, but I just don't love that, and I want to use music in my life for the Lord. And that's how I felt. Can I glorify God in the excellence of example that I can give in music? And it opens doors. I sing with all sorts of people. I sing in a professional paid ensemble that next weekend we have a concert. We will be singing all sorts of classical material, and it's endowed like $40,000, $50,000. I'm not sure the exact amount. And we're paid to go to rehearsal. We're paid to sing. And
how cool is that, right?
It's very cool. We were hired last year. I stood on stage and sang behind Andrea Bocelli and helped as a paid backup singer for his classical concert. Yeah, just a little name there. And I got paid for it. And
do you get starstruck when you meet these guys?
Oh, well, they didn't let us anywhere near him. Probably they didn't want to get sick, but I got 2 tickets for my daughter and my wife. Cool. I said, when am I ever going to do this? And they were in the nosebleed. It was $1,000 for 2 tickets.
Wow.
The seats down front, scalped the day of the concert for $21,000 a seat. Yeah, yeah. I'd say I don't have to sing one concert a year, And
yeah. Or go to one and there it will win.
Yeah. But back on mission, I don't know, just staying yielded to God and trusting Him, seeing Him work so clearly, step by step, and organizing. Like even the church I'm in now, I wound up leaving a church that I walked away from a very nice supplemental salary, but I just felt I could not serve there anymore, the direction that they wanted to go. And an evangelist friend of mine, before my last Sunday, I gave notice and it was going to be the first of the year, an evangelist friend of mine called me. He was driving home from this church, and he said, Dave, they need a music guy here. Would you be interested? And it's 75 miles round trip. Our other church was 112 miles round trip. My wife said, do we really want to do that again? Because it's over an hour one way going through Greenville to the other side. And I first told the pastor, I just don't know.
You probably passed 110 Baptist churches.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I did have, some other churches of other denominations approach me, but no. And the Lord just opened this door, and it's been such a blessing to just grow there. But what has probably morphed, and again, Dr. Gus invited me back to teach, to be able to teach young people that were hungry, that I could steer and we always worked on worship music, always gospel music, along with the classical, and always striving excellence. But say you're an ambassador for God. That's the number one thing that you need to be focused on here. Whether you go out in the secular world or what, you're an ambassador for God, and that's my mission: to be an ambassador for God, to be a good husband, to be a good father, and we've all we can look back at failures there, but to continue as long as God allows me. I mean, I'm 70. I'm taking Social Security. I could just sit back and do nothing. But God has opened more opportunities for me since I retired than I had before. I was singing everywhere last fall. I was in West Virginia, or in Virginia, down in Georgia. I taught at Ambassador Baptist College for a number of days and sang there. In about 3 weeks, I go to Manitoba, and we'll do a sacred concert there with a fine, fundamental church, Keystone Baptist Church, Pastor Sam Souza, that's very like-minded, very like-spirited. And so I look forward to that. And
so you mentioned the word excellence, and you mentioned that in your presentation earlier today, and you talked about students that you've had that have gone on to success both in the secular arenas and in the sacred music world, as well as probably many other vocations along the way, from choirs and different things that you've led over the years. And I wonder if you could help me understand from your perspective that the reasons or the rationales why it's so important for the believer to strive for excellence, even in the professional or seemingly secular or mechanical aspects of your discipline. Your discipline is music. My discipline is the law or academics. And so I think this principle maybe could apply no matter what the discipline is.
Yeah.
But why is it so important for a believer to really hone their craft and their calling towards excellence?
Well, Scripture mandates, approve that which is excellent. We're to pursue virtue, which is moral excellence, and but excellence in what we do. I remember a phrase that Dr. Bob Jr., I think, first would say that all things being equal, that the believer should be a step above the unsaved person. We have a credibility to show the world that we're going to do the very best, but we're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for a higher cause, to be excellent in what we do. And the world would look, if we do things sloppily, if we do things not professionally, that the world sees that, and I believe it brings reproach even on our other message, which is you need to know Christ and follow Him. And it's opened doors for me. I remember just during COVID, in fact, it was this one group that I sing in, that they wanted us to sing with masks, and I said, I'm not going to sing with a mask on. And and I'm singing in there with people of all stripes, and so there's really opportunity, and I have some great fellowship in there for some believers, and they're not necessarily my separatist philosophy, but we have tremendous still fellowship in for a dinner before we go to rehearsal or something. But I remember writing a 2-page letter to the director, just giving him a salvation. And I know he's very spiritual, but he's a pluralist. He believes, many different ways. And I ended it with the argument that we all know that, well, if you're right and I'm wrong, I really don't have anything to worry about. But I said, if I'm right and you're wrong, I fear for your eternal soul. It was 2 pages, and I just thought, I don't want to be responsible for never having witnessed to him if I didn't come back. Well, I wound up coming back 2 years later. Anyway, he wrote me a response, 4 words, 5 words. He says, "Thank you for your reply." That was it. So anyway, the seed was there, but he's brought me back. Last fall I was soloing with the Greenville Symphony in what we call the Peace Center downtown, and did the Messiah with the Greenville Symphony, and I'll sing next fall in the Peace Center again, a secular work with the group. I'll solo. So he knows where I stand, and hopefully just my testimony before him will the Holy Spirit can get an inroad somewhere.
Right. And that door was opened
Yes.
because you were invited to come and do that. That's
Yes.
not going to happen if you haven't, behind the scenes,
Absolutely.
spent a lot of time in that practice room.
Yes.
And, that's where so many of us want to have the results of success, but not necessarily put in the work that it takes to get there. Obviously, you have been given tremendous gifts from God to sing and to understand, perform that. But in some ways, I think we downplay the amount of work that has to be put in when we say, well, look how much talent that person has, as if they just were born.
Well, this recital tomorrow night, some of it is from a farewell recital I gave last April. I started on the music in the summer of 2023. I'm singing Russian, even though Russian was one of my doctoral languages. That music took me months daily working on it. So I have not worked on the music for the past, since before Christmas. Every day I'm in the music. On the plane up here, went through the complete recital twice. Yesterday afternoon, last night, this afternoon, I will go through it again because it's all memorized. And it's an hour and a half of Italian, German, French, Russian, and then this English, and then ending with another Italian piece. So,
wow. I hope I got tickets. I tell you what, I have to make sure Mrs. Graham got me good seats. We are looking forward to Artist Series. We always do it around Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And, the theme is kind of around the love theme and everything.
Yes.
You know what the students' responses to that is always, why are you pressuring us so much? Yes.
And
I say, hey, no pressure. Just offer an opportunity. All right. This is setting you up to succeed.
Well, the interesting thing, one thing I'm going to do tomorrow is at each language group, I'm going to teach them to say, I love you in that language.
Oh, man,
so
you are really helping.
Ti amo, ich liebe dich, je t'aime, я тебя люблю, and then the very hard one, I love you, in English.
Evan, are you getting this? All right, but you should be taking notes. I'm trying to help the youngsters.
That's right.
That's right. Well, okay, here's a dumb question, but I think it's a very practical one. For someone at your level of success and achievement, and you've had experiences and done things that most of us just like are in awe of. What keeps you humble? You're still such a down to earth and humble guy, and we've probably all known people that get into the arts and have some level of success, and then they're no useful good to anybody, and they just get so full of themselves, and they almost forget that this is talent on loan from God. I wonder what you do intentionally or specifically, or what God has done in your life to keep you with that sense of humility.
Well, your family will keep you humble.
That's for sure.
My daughters would always say, my daddy's the kind of doctor that can't help anybody. But
we have a lot of those around here.
Yeah, and when I finished it, my friends would come up to me, oh, my elbow hurts, doctor, can you help me? And come on. No, I mean, it's God's grace, and I think it's just a constant reminder that it's all about God, it's not about me. And, anything, Dr. Bob Third used to say, anything you see good around here, God did it, and anything bad, we did it. And that's how I feel like my life.
Yeah, that's so true in leadership too, and it's amazing the things that I get credit for that I didn't even know about.
Yes,
and I say, well, the team, or
yes.
Obviously the Lord's blessing, and then there's things we stress out about in life and worry about, and then the next day when God unfolds His plan all along and says, well, this is what I was doing, and we realize it. We go, oh, I guess that wasn't really up to me after all.
Yes.
So it's interesting the balance that you are describing here between excellence but God's glory, humility versus success, and that it's not necessarily wrong to strive for success, right?
Yes.
I teach a lot of business students, and I've noticed over the years, especially amongst Christian university students, that they can almost have a sense of being apologetic or hesitant to even attempt to be successful, whether it be in their business or whatever, and that, of course, in that world means financially, and say, well, somehow there's a virtue in being poor or being unsuccessful. And I'm saying, no, it's okay to want to be successful as long as you have God's glory in mind, and as long as you're looking for, as you've mentioned, those open doors of opportunity.
Yes. I have a funny anecdote. My neighbor, he just laughs that I'm always like building something. I built my own pole barn with my wife's help, actually, and then hired out for the trusses and the front door. But I put the telephone poles in the ground, hand dug the holes and everything. And I'm down there one day working on this, just sweaty, probably looked like a homeless man, and just working really hard. And the next day I was soloing at the Peace Center in Tails tuxedo, and they came to the concert, and he asked his wife, he says, I don't see Dave up there. And she says, he's right there. He didn't recognize me in a tuxedo. And
That's perfect. That's perfect. And, it's amazing what can get done if you're not worried about who gets the credit.
Right.
And if you're not really about yourself. But that's a self-discipline. And, music excellence is a self-discipline, but so too are the attitudes of Christ-likeness that come along with. And you talked quite a bit today about the believer disciplining his life. You talked about the calling of God is always for us to live intentionally conservative lives, devout, sober, sincere, and intentional. And that is something I feel like is missing, not only from this world, but from the church, from many of the advice books and so-called spiritual leaders of this nation and around the world. It's like, I feel like this, therefore that's my authentic self, and nonsense like that.
It's looking at Scripture and saying, I'm going to intentionally go that direction, even if my flesh, they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh. Mm-hmm. So I've got to daily crucify the flesh and intentionally desire to honor God in the what's very true in His Word, the reverence that we worship Him in holiness, and that goes with music, that goes with every aspect. And I'm in a church that the pastor feels exactly that way, and that's just such an encouragement. I have a Sunday school teacher that's a retired businessman that worked for Cornell, I think, and went all over the world, and he's such a Bible teacher, just incredible. And he's one of the people, Proverbs says in the counsel of many there's safety. And even when I was developing this message for chapel today, I had about 6 or 7 people that I sent it off to. Said, I need feedback. Dr. Chuck Phelps, Mr. Kurt Wetzel, my Sunday school teacher, my pastor, my brother, whom I so highly respect, and others. And they would all graciously give feedback. And so there's great safety there.
Yeah. So I want to close our discussion with your observations. In particular, we live in overlapping circles and fellowships, but you have a particular view of things, and you get around and see what's going on in different churches and different areas. What are you encouraged about in the current state of local churches that you're in? I mean, we could talk for hours about all the things that we're wringing our hands and, that are disappointing or whatever, but what is it that's got you encouraged about what the Lord's doing in local churches these days?
Well, Elijah reached the depths of discouragement and was reminded there were 7,000 that hadn't bowed the knee. when I'm out in a church, well, when I'm here in this ministry is being as great a blessing to me as hopefully I can be to it. To just see what's being done here and the people that are standing true. When I go to that church in 3 weeks from now up in Manitoba, I already know the philosophy of that church. And probably my greatest ministry will be just encouraging them that, hey, what you're standing for is right and true. Don't give up. I was at a church in Virginia last fall giving a sacred concert, and it was just like that. The people that are doing the music, solid and right on target, you know. And then there's all the others. They wouldn't even want me in their church, probably.
Well, you represent, when your name was on the docket for this artist series and we were talking about it administratively, I know your ministry, and I said, you know, Dr. Parker represents where we are as an organization, as a ministry, and where a lot of people have been.
Yes.
But not where a lot of people are today.
Yes, right.
And I am concerned that these are fights that need to be fought. And you are unapologetically talking to whoever will listen, and you're putting it out there very articulately, very graciously, but very firmly. Hey guys, these are biblical principles that have not changed, have not gone out of style. They've gone out of style, but they haven't changed. And, I love your message today to say, listen, we need to reflect the majesty and glory of God. We need to reflect the holiness of God, the righteousness of God. But in worship, there is joy.
Yes.
And you went through several passages in the Psalms that talk about joyfully singing.
Yes.
And you reflect that with your life, with your music, with your message. And yet you can be joyful, you can be personable, you can be others-oriented, bring God glory without compromising. And that's such a wonderful ministry that you have. I'm so thankful for your generosity and your time today and in sharing it with us, your heartfelt and very genuine observations about life, about what God is doing in your life and your family. And it's just been a great encouragement. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to On Mission, a podcast produced by Maranatha Baptist University. No matter where you go to school, you're going to face the enormous social challenges of our world today. Where do you want to go through that developmental process? A place like Maranatha, designed to affirm your faith and help you think biblically? Or a secular college, dedicated to godless instruction in a God-free or truly anti-God environment that offers no hope, no joy, no faith, and certainly no peace? At Maranatha, you'll be surrounded by friends who have also chosen the path of truth and faculty who devote their lives to service. Maranatha is more than a Christian college. Find out more at mbu.edu. And for more information about our podcast guests and to listen to all the previous episodes, visit mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.